Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Trump hits India with a 50% tariff over Russian oil ties, sparking trade panic and sweeping tax reforms in Delhi. Denmark summons U.S. envoy after Trump-linked operatives run influence campaigns in Greenland. Trump says 600,000 Chinese students could attend U.S. colleges. MAGA base explodes in backlash. State Department revokes 6,000 student visas over alleged crimes, overstays, and terror ties. Trump's FEMA cut slammed by staff as disaster waiting to happen. Katrina-era protections gutted. And federal governor Lisa Cook defies Trump's firing push. Legal showdown looms over Fed independence. Supreme Court president suggests Trump may not have power to fire Fed officials at will. And boy, does it get thicker than that. So tariffs, what a beautiful word. That is what President Trump has stated. He imposed a sweeping 50% tariff on a range of Indian exports effective today, doubling an earlier 25% rate. And the U.S. called it punishment for India's continued purchase of discounted Russian oil and arms, which Washington claims indirectly supports Russian war in Ukraine. And that's true. I mean, if you're going to buy their resources, it does help them to fund their war. It helps them to create more bombs, more tanks, machine guns, whatever it may be. But what do you expect India to do? Russia is selling India oil and natural gas at a very low amount, very low cost. And if you're buying from us, it's not going to be as low as Russian oil and natural gas. That is the same why Europeans in the UK, France, and others were buying Russian oil and gas, because it was cheaper than America. Now, there were some countries like Saudi Arabia, even to the regards of Venezuela, was also some of the exporters of oil to a lot of these regions, and they cut those off as well. So what do you expect India to do? Now, I'm not taking the side of India. There's a deal always to be made. So they could have brokered a deal with the United States of America, Saudi Arabia, or any of our allies. But again, America has put those sanctions on on Russia, and India was still buying oil and natural gas from Russia, given to the reports. So he's raised the tariff another 25%. So now we have 50% tariffs on a range of Indian exports that is effective today. And believe me, these tariffs hit labor intensive sectors. We're talking about garments, jewelry, footwear, shrimp, furniture, impacting to 66% of India's exports to the US, which is worth tens of billions of dollars. And analysts are warning of up to 70% collapse in some industries. Now, India responded with sweeping domestic reforms, a $12 billion income tax cut, GST simplification, and they're pushing for more self-reliance within India. Now, they also reaffirmed strategic defense procurements and is leaning into the BRICS and China to offset disruption. So now you have India leaning more into their allies when it comes to the BRICS. And the BRICS is the abbreviation of countries that gather together to eventually change their backing of their currency from fiat dollars to gold, silver, and other rare minerals. So when you look at the BRICS, you have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there's a lot of other countries, but they're going to keep the name the BRICS. So already they're leaning more into the BRICS. So they may cut out the US entirely. And the question I only have, because I don't know this on an economical standpoint, does America need India? Now, granted, there are a lot of Indian immigrants and Indian Americans in America. I wonder, is that going to affect their visas? Is that going to affect their residency? Is that going to affect their citizenship? Again, I'm only pointing these things out because the way that the Trump administration is moving, some of the things that they're doing, ladies and gentlemen, are petty. Okay, they're retaliatory. they're petty, they're revengeful. Because when you, and again, it depends on what news media, I kind of just grabbed the clip for you guys so you can have a visual. Trump imposed a 50% tariff on India as punishment for buying Russian oil, or this can be retaliatory, or this can be furthering the tariff because they are violating sanctions. So it may not be punishment. It's just, hey, you broke a rule or you didn't agree to the terms that we put on Russia. So the word punishment could be a stretch, but then again, it is a punishment, okay? Because we told you not to do something, you did it anyway, and now you're on punishment. Same thing you do with your kids, ladies and gentlemen. So I do understand that as well. Now, Denmark formally summoned the top U.S. diplomatic in Copenhagen after reports that Americans with ties to Trump-led covert influence operations in Greenland, trying to stir secessionist sentiment and compel friend or foe lists. Now, the Danish foreign minister, he called such interference unacceptable, especially amid Trump's openly stated interest in U.S. jurisdiction over the strategic Arctic territory. This was when Trump was calling for Greenland to be the 51st state, or us to purchase Greenland, or for us to provide protections against Russia to Greenland, and that we should just basically take over Greenland. So now Denmark, because of this special envoy that is in Denmark, they're protesting in Denmark at this moment. People who really don't protest, you don't really hear Denmark and countries like Switzerland ever protest about things, because I guess they live great lives in these countries, because you don't really hear too many skirmishes, internal domestic battles of any really huge problems coming out of these countries. But they are in an uproar against President Trump, because all the sentiments that he made prior to, as well with Pete Hegseth stating that Greenland would be a very strategic location for us to put up bases, so we should just take over Greenland, so to speak, paraphrasing. We should just take over Greenland. We should purchase it from Denmark. We should provide protection because Denmark hasn't done that. So now the Denmark citizens are crying foul. They're protesting. When you get Denmark and Switzerland upset, they stated, one of the protest signs that I saw stated that USA is a bad ally, that we're not good friends. We're not good friends at all. So when I look at this, ladies and gentlemen, on some things, and I've said this and I'll beat the drum continuously on this, President Trump, on some, of course, when it comes to the business acumen, on some dealings, not all. And I'm not referencing the one big beautiful bill. I'm not even referencing the tariffs, but some of the things he's done, if you read inside a lot of the legislation and executive orders that he has passed, could be beneficial for America. But when it comes to international relations and some of the things that he stated, they're hyperbolic at best. He's really roughing the feathers about a lot of our international allies. But nonetheless, I'll keep you guys updated on this story as well. If you're new to Blacklogic, please hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell, so I notify you every time I release a video and or go live. These are really some hot topics here this morning, ladies and gentlemen, because President Trump has attempted to remove Fed Governor Lisa Cook. And he has been citing allegations like mortgage fraud, but a lot of the legal experts say he's only, a lot of his allegations are on shaky ground. There's really no substantial evidence that President Trump or the Trump administration has presented, okay, that will solidify his stance of firing her. And the federal law stipulates that Fed members can only be removed for cause. And we're talking about inefficiency, negligence, malfeasance, fraud, but never via political whim, not just because the president has said, oh, I'm going to fire her. See, this is what I was referencing in my video last night, ladies and gentlemen, about President Trump is almost making America federal. Federal America, or American federal, whatever you want to label it, name it, call it, but I'm going to call it Federal America. These are no longer seems to be like the United States of America. The reason why the Constitution and the founding fathers have done what they have done, so the president cannot have ultimate power like a king, like being a monarch, okay, like being an emperor. They did this so he can't just do a sweeping firing of people he don't like, people he don't agree with. It doesn't matter if it's political, if it's demographic, it's some of the decisions that they made. As long as they being lawful, they can stay in place, and he needs just cause. And I would like to tell Lisa Cook, watch your front, watch your back, and watch your side. Because the president has his eyes on you, and believe me, we talking about colluding and corruption and collaboration of a lot of compadres that may say that you're a friend, but we know how backstabbers are. If they can get a trinket from the president of the United States, believe me when I tell you this, that they could be coming after you. So believe me, keep your nose clean, sis. Keep your nose clean. Now, Cook's attorney has vowed to sue to prevent her ousting if this goes to court. It may end up before the Supreme Court, putting central bank independence on the line. So I'll keep you guys updated with that as well, as that story is still maturing. Now, this is also some of the things they've said about it, but again, we just covered that. So I'll move on to this visa debacle, because this spring, this summer, and now into fall, the State Department has revoked over 6,000 student visas, largely for overstays or expirations of those visas or criminal law violations. Some assault, DUI, burglary, and in some cases, alleged support for terrorism. That is what the reports are stating. Now, Trump has reversed course. He announced allowing 600,000, listen, over 500,000 Chinese students to study in U.S. universities, and this marks a dramatic shift from prior hardline visa restrictions. Now, do not forget, when a lot of these students from all these other countries come over, they are most likely coming from affluent families, but they also get government assistance. Again, why are you not investing in American students? Black, white, Asian, and Hispanic, not people from a whole nother country. Because again, we understand that America is a melting pot. We understand there has been other groups of people here other than the Native Americans and the Black American Indians who have been here for 2 or 3 generations, 4 generations. But foundational Black Americans as well as Native American Indians, they've been here for 6, 7 generations. So when we look at this, ladies and gentlemen, he's allowing over 500,000 Chinese students while revoking other student visas. Now, of course, this move has ignited backlash within the MAGA base, and prominent figures like Steve Bannon, he's been on a tear, okay? Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's been on a tear, as well as Laura Loomer called it unpatriotic and a threat to America first. Critics raised national security concerns and laminated U.S. students being sidelined. Of course, U.S. students are being sidelined. Why not give support to HBCUs? Okay. Why not help their tech programs? Why not help their AI programs and inspire, motivate, and invest in HBCUs? PWI's got the money. But now he did state, and I'll point this out, he did state that if these students don't come over to the university and college that they are interested in going, that 15% could bury a lot of these universities in financial debt. Of course, and again, this is this Trump defending the plan, saying colleges would struggle without international students and that Chinese students are important. Even citing it to President Xi in recent talks that Chinese students are important. What about American students? See, this is the part I agree with the MAGA base. I don't agree much with what they state, but I do agree with this. Whatever happened to America first? No, what we're dealing with is whatever Trump says, whatever Trump does, it goes. Everybody agrees, everybody fall in line. So this is not America first. And you have to stay with me here. This is America first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. This is what this is about. That is so-called America first. Okay? Because he is allowing 600,000 Chinese students, okay, inside of this. And matter of fact, let's break this down even more so. I want you guys to listen in on this quick report so you guys are providing more context.
President Donald Trump appeared to change the nation's policy on Chinese student visas on Monday, announcing he is allowing a massive wave of students into the U.S. It's a shift from a policy Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced in May that said the U.S. is revoking visas from Chinese students.
I hear so many stories about we're not going to allow their students, or we're going to allow their students to come in. We're going to allow, it's very important, 600,000 students.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told Fox News' Laura Ingraham Monday that Trump sought for the students to help the 15% of colleges who would face closures without a boost in attendance. Trump has not detailed how or if the visas would be allocated. The president's announcement drew sharp criticism from some of his closest allies, like Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. She wrote on X that, quote, if refusing to allow these Chinese students to attend our schools causes 15% of them to fail, then these schools should fail anyways because they are being propped up by the CCP. Trump noted that relations between the U.S. and China have improved since the Biden administration, warranting a new economic approach.
We have a very strong relationship, Howard, I would say, economically with China now, getting much better.
Trump has threatened to impose a 200% tariff on imports from China, but has suspended the levy until at least November.
Now, a lot of you, again, may be asking or maybe saying this doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense because we have all of these so-called concrete reports of Chinese espionage, Chinese cyber hacking, Chinese spies within America. Who do you think is going to be paying for 600,000 Chinese tuitions? You believe 600,000 Chinese families are paying for this? Or do you believe that the Chinese government is going to support a lot of these students coming over to America and learning some of our technologies in reference to AI? Now, granted, they're already beating us in the electric car market. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, if you look at some of these electric cars coming out of China, they can swim, they can jump, they can hop. They have all sorts of, talk to text, or not even talk to text, talk to the AI. And the AI does exactly what you want to say. It's like almost saying, hey, Jolly. I'm just using a name that just came to the top of my mind. Hey, Jolly, open up the sunroof. Okay, open up the sunroof. Hey, Jolly, fold the back seats. They fold in the back seats. Whatever you tell the car to do, you don't have to do anything manually anymore. So they already beating us in the car market. When you go to China, ladies and gentlemen, people think China, they living in the backwoods. No, China is modernized like a mofo. Shanghai, Beijing, Macau, you name it. Okay. Hong Kong. These cities are of the future. And guess who's second on, who's coming up second when it comes technological cities? Dubai, or as people say, Dubai. Again, I heard that from one of the sheiks that the actual pronunciation is Dubai, not Dubai. But again, global verbiage, language, linguistics, states that it's Dubai to the American tongue. But nonetheless, they're making technological cities. America is definitely behind. So we're going to educate an additional 600,000 Chinese students. And I'm not stating not allowing international students into America. I'm not stating that. But I do agree with this one point that the MAGA base has stated. Whatever happened to America first? Whatever happened to investing into American students? That is what I'm referring to. That is what I'm referring to. Now, I don't know if you guys have been aware of this, because this is the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. 181 current and former FEMA officials released a scathing letter called the Katrina Declaration, warning that Trump-era budget cuts, staff reductions, and political interference have eroded key disaster response. We're talking about 181 current and former FEMA officials. And the city delayed operational contracts. They reduced climate science grants. They rolled back so many of the things that came out of Hurricane Katrina, and they weakened the mitigation programs that would mitigate a lot of these natural disasters. and warned that the recent deadly flooding in Texas showed the strain in capacity, even though President Trump has lent a helping hand to Governor Abbott to support a lot of the flooding in Texas, as he should. But again, if you didn't roll back a lot of the FEMA programs, you probably wouldn't have to provide additional support because it was already in the FEMA programs. We're talking about 20 plus FEMA employees who signed a letter were reportedly suspended. Those current employees suspended, and the cabinet reports, and they confirm instability in role morale within the agency, of course, because now they're fearful of their jobs of telling the truth. See, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, whether you be a Republican conservative or a Democratic liberal, it does not matter. This is why you should never choose a side. You should always choose a side of truth, because governmental programs like this are to assist cities, states, towns in disaster recovery and disaster relief for the people of the United States of America. Again, America first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. That is what we're looking at, because as we look at this, when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, I believe, it didn't just rip through levees and neighborhoods. It tore through the mass of America's racial inequalities, because the images still haunt thousands of mostly Black residents stranded on rooftops, in the Superdome, in floodwaters. Entire communities, over 100,000 people were left without food and clean water, medical support for days. But yet, when you looked at the nearby predominantly white parishes in the wealthier neighborhoods, federal aid and evacuation efforts moved with striking speed. So this message and this pic that you see here is unmistakable. Who gets saved in America depends on who you are and where you live. Torn to shreds. Because when I look at this, the root of the disaster actually lies in multiple failures. Because FEMA under George W. Bush was unprepared, underfunded, and politically stacked. And the director at the time, Michael Brown, he had little emergency management experience. His infamous "Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job" quote became shorthand for his incompetence. And the state of Louisiana failed to coordinate National Guard resources effectively, leaving the poorest neighborhoods unprotected and unrescued, where people were stranded on rooftops. And what about one of the most historic cities in Louisiana, New Orleans? They knew that the levees were vulnerable for years, but ignored engineering warnings. Where are these government officials at? What are you guys doing? Whatever happened to inspections and audits? And when disaster struck, guess who was more prone to be killed by this hurricane? Who to be left stranded on rooftops? And the most people who drowned during Katrina? The Black communities, Ninth Ward, New Orleans East. They were abandoned first. See, it wasn't just government. That's what we would like to believe. But it was the Red Cross initially that delayed entering New Orleans, citing safety concerns, leaving evacuees at the Superdome without critical supplies. And insurance companies dragged their feet on payouts, leaving Black homeowners who often had fewer legal resources. And then things became stuck in litigation in court, while white communities were rebuilt first. So Louisiana, decimated by Katrina. Predominantly white communities, rescued first. Resource first, support first. Not equally, not separate but equal, separate but unequal. What neighborhoods got built first? Not at the same time. And contractors under FEMA, $62 billion reconstruction budget funneled money to political connected firms like Halliburton. You guys remember Halliburton back in the day when they was talking about Katrina and all that fraudulent money that was being funneled, while small Black owned businesses in New Orleans received scraps. well, here's $1,000 to replace your wall. My whole store is underwater. The next business owner in the adjacent community, in the adjacent area, received $25,000. Oh, it was a different case. It was a different case. Everything is not as though it seems, ladies and gentlemen, until you dive into the details. This is where we are. So when people tell me that racism doesn't exist in America, unfortunately, it still does. Have racism in America decreased? The jury is still out. Because post-Katrina, now they had the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act. I believe they signed that in 2006. And that strengthened FEMA, making a full agency inside DHS with more authority. And it required disaster response plans to include vulnerable populations. We're talking about elderly, disabled, poor, and minorities. Then you also had the Stafford Act amendments that gave FEMA broader authority to deploy resources pre-disaster and not just after. So when we knew that a storm was coming in, we will already deploy resources to that area, so things will already be in place. So we can have storage places where they have sandbags and prefabricated ravines where you can divert water to different locations, so people's homes and businesses won't be destroyed by the national disaster. This is crazy. He rolled back a lot of this legislation. What about the civil rights integration? FEMA was ordered to address racial disparities in disaster aid distribution because they had evidence of racial disparity when it came to who got help, who got supported first. And again, people would like to be very hyperbolic and emotional about it. No, the truth is a fact, and the fact is the truth in regards to Katrina. Now, if you fast forward, Trump's FEMA rolled back much of this legislation that basically quietly stripped away a lot of these safeguards. A lot of this didn't get highlighted like other legislation and executive orders that President Trump either rolled back or signed into law. Because the 2018 FEMA strategic plan, it gutted the equity language, focused instead on self-reliance and state responsibility. Self-reliance during a flood? At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, if I lived in Louisiana, I don't care if I live in an apartment or a house, I'm gonna have some inflatable boat. I'm gonna have something in case this occurs again, because it's damn to happen again. And hopefully they reinforce those levees. They also did roll back to civil rights oversight because FEMA stopped tracking racial disparities in disaster aid, essentially erasing the very lessons of Katrina. Again, there were actual evidence and reports of racial disparity, but yeah, we're not going to track that no more because Trump rolled that back. We don't have to track it no more. What about Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria? That happened in 2017. And again, echoes of Katrina, slow aid, undercounted deaths. Later estimated at nearly 3,000 people perished. And we're talking about disproportionate negligence of poor non-white communities. And then the budget cuts. Trump tried to cut FEMA funding by hundreds of millions of dollars, shifting resources towards ICE and border enforcement instead. What in the world happened to America first? Oh, well, he diverted those funds because we have a bigger problem with illegal immigration. Not if a flood, not if a typhoon, hurricane, tornado hits a city, town, or state near you, then you will want that hundreds of millions of dollars in FEMA and disaster relief and support. Yes, you would. And I believe that the authority lies in the Stafford Act of 1988, which gives presidents immense control over FEMA declarations because FEMA is housed inside of DHS, no less. And its priorities are political, not neutral. Congress has a very limited appetite to push reforms. And the courts defer heavily to executive discretion when it comes to these emergencies. So when Trump deprioritized minority communities in disaster aid, the infrastructure allowed him to do it unchecked. He's doing whatever the hell he wants to do. And I like the fact that you have Republicans, you have people in the MAGA base calling foul on some of the things. Now, they haven't called foul on this, but they called foul on the 600,000 Chinese students. I wonder for people, when I look at certain political and news channels and right-winged or right-leaning libertarian channels that are Trump supporters, are they ever going to call out some of the heinous things that Trump has been doing? Because again, I will acknowledge some of the legislation that could benefit America that Trump is doing, but I'm gonna call out some of the chaotic things that will leave a lot of people in turmoil when it comes to this, ladies and gentlemen. Because if anything that we learned from Katrina, it forced America to confront its racism and disaster response. It created reforms that on paper made FEMA stronger. And even when it comes to environmental racism, meaning that you have Black communities near factories that emit harmful chemical smoke, that people in those towns and areas have been catching cancer and all sorts of other diseases from it. It's amazing the amount of racism that America has that people just can't see on the surface. So if a police officer is not beating you across the head or shooting you in the back, there's no racism. Racism, as I stated, when we say that it's systematic, these are the systems where we're talking about. Where you serve other communities first, where other communities get more resources, more support, where other communities are rebuilt first. This is what we're talking about. Because those reforms that Katrina put in place, those reforms were undone. So Black communities remain the most vulnerable in every major disaster, either New Orleans, Houston, Puerto Rico, Florida, you name it. And the truth is, Katrina actually showed us that who lives and who dies is very political. And Trump's FEMA policies have dragged us back to the same place we swore we'd never return to. So don't tell me that racism does exist. Not only does it exist on the surface, it also exists in the systems.